Good evening and welcome to the Legion Cantina. In today's episode, I'm going to be running through 3 different potential lists for an upcoming tournament that I'm going to be going to, and then I'm going to get you guys to vote on which one you think I should take. So, competitive rebel list building, it's not something I've talked about a whole lot. I think I've kind of alluded to it a fair bit in videos on the channel, but yeah, I just want to run through some lists that I'm looking to take to an upcoming tournament. I'm going to the UK GT event up in Birmingham. It is a 2-day event. I've only bought tickets to the first day. It's basically 4 games on the Saturday and 2 games on the Sunday. I think there's going to be a cut after the Saturday, so I'm not anticipating making it through to the Sunday, but if I do make it through to the Sunday and need a ticket, I'm sure I'll be able to sort that one out. But yeah, only anticipating really making it through to the end of Saturday, realistically. But yeah, 3 different potential list options. They all do slightly different things. I think one of them is maybe a fair bit less competitive than the others, but still not a bad list, but probably offers a bit more theme. And then 2 of them are definitely a bit more hardcore on the sort of sweaty gaming front. But yeah, I'll run through them in no particular order. And yeah, just at the end, I'm going to chuck a poll on the channel and get you to sort of select which one you think I should take. So, first one I'm going to be talking about is this list here. It's Lando with Bad Batch Din, 2 rebels with Astros, fleet troopers with scattergun extra trooper and environmental gear, 2 sleeper cells with the Astro and prepared supplies, 1 Ewok slinger squad, land speeder, and 2 ATRTs with the laser cannon. So that's coming in at 12 activations. And yeah, essentially you can probably tell basically what this list is going to be doing. I've got Din and Bad Batch as kind of the ones who are going to be making the big plays. So Bad Batch especially super tough. Damage output isn't crazy, but enough to get by. And then Din is tougher than I have actually expected in the games I've used him in, especially when you're able to get those dodges and set up, that immune pierce and things like that with the spear. The land speeder is going to be sort of very aggressive early on, so I'm anticipating moving on with an aim from link targeting and then taking another aim and then shooting, probably popping the Astro turn 1 realistically, as long as you can get into range, and then yeah, obviously firing off those 2 fairly damaging shots with, I think it's impact 4, crit 1, ion, all that good stuff, so really slowing down any big vehicles and hopefully putting in a lot of damage too. And then to complement that with some nice turn 1 damage, got the 2 ATRTs with the cannons, which again, likely shooting into vehicles. And having done a bit of the maths on this, basically the land speeder can expect to hit 5 to 6 times with an aim through armor, because you expect to get 1 crit naturally, then you've got crit 1 giving you another crit, and then you hope to get at least 3 natural hits to then change up with that impact 3. So again, you're hoping roughly for 5 and 6 if you're lucky through with an aim on those shots. And then obviously if you're firing twice with the Astro, you're getting 10 hits through against armor, which is a pretty big deal. And then the ATRTs, if you can get an aim, you're normally hoping for 3. If you don't have an aim, you're normally expecting 2. But again, that gives me another sort of 4 or 5 hits through armor. So realistically on turn 1, it's not that unreasonable to expect 15 hits against armored vehicles, which is it's a pretty big deal, and I think is definitely something that I hope my opponents will be afraid of. And then elsewhere, again, you've got Din and Bad Batch kind of making the plays they need to play. In my experience, Bad Batch can kind of tag an objective by themselves. They're very hard to deal with, especially if the fire is drawn, as I'm hoping it's going to be to the land speeder early on. So realistically, if Bad Batch are kind of fully healthy by the end of turn 2, they should be fine for the rest of the game. Din Djarin, a bit more aggressive. I'm hoping he can go in and kind of clog up a force user, or if some kind of other big melee threat if my opponent has that. Then with the Flamer, he can deal with any units around him, and obviously can shoot the pistol out of melee as well with that versatile, which is why I'm taking up close and personal. Having looked at the FAQ, if you split fire, you do get a dodge off that as well. And then the comms jammer, just to make him more of a pain to deal with, and it might, especially if he's charged into, a special forces unit or a big core unit or something, might just make it that bit more difficult to get an order onto it, and potentially even disrupt some droid order chains and things like that. Finally, we've got Lando, who combos, I think, quite well with the fleet troopers, whether he's giving them a free move or if they're waiting around a corner, he can give them a standby, which could also be super useful. So to just kind of give me some nice area control. And Lando also brings, his underworld connections, a couple of decent command cards, although his 3-pip is garbage. His 2-pip and his 1-pip are not bad at all. And if nothing else, one step ahead could always be super useful if it lines up, once or twice on Bad Batch or Din Djarin, for instance. It could be really nice for getting them out of a tricky spot. And then, a couple of Sleeper Cell running around. Going to use them much more passively. I think got enough units making plays with Din and Bad Batch and the Land Speeder. So basically the balance I'm taking with Sleeper Cell is I'm normally either taking them with targeting scopes or with prepared supplies. Given they're not necessarily going to be getting that many orders in this list, a lot of the time I think having that prepared supplies to preemptively set up that dodge is super nice. Might just keep one or two of them alive that bit longer to give you that increased firepower. But yeah, in terms of command cards, I would be taking Corellian Spike, and this is the way, so Lando and Din's 1-pips. Then Ace Up His Sleeve, which is a 2-pip that is actually a 1-pip in game and gives you the old contingencies effect, which is super nice. So if you really need to get his one step ahead ability to line up, you could play a different command card. So for instance, you could play Aggression, and then if they played a 1-pip and you really needed one step ahead to go off, you could trade it out and then hopefully get that 1-pip effect to go off. And then, taking Aggression. So this has now been reworded, so it works on commanders or operatives. So I'm just taking this over Push, and I think a lot of the time it might just give, one order to Bad Batch and then maybe an aim to Din, for instance, to keep that independent. And then we do what we do, which is Bad Batch's 3-pip. Tempting to play that, maybe like a turn 2 or something, because that's when they'll really need their orders. But obviously I'm hoping to get orders on the Land Speeder as well, so maybe not. And then finally got Discretion, which is the other generic mercenary one. Again, probably giving out 1 or 2 orders with this, and then giving the extra dodge to one of the mercenary units, Bad Batch or Din Djarin. But yeah, it's got some really good damage. It's got some nice units that can make big plays, and in Lando and some Rebel Troopers and the Ewok Slingers, it's got some units that can score me the back objectives and things like that, and play a bit more passively. So I think it's actually quite a nicely balanced list, and definitely has the damage output that you need from a Rebel list. In terms of the objectives I would take with this, realistically, I think I may well end up taking Bunker Assault and Intercept, just because I think Din and Bad Batch can just secure those objectives really well, potentially. And then in terms of the third one, I'm a big fan of Breakthrough. It's just the one I have most experience on and feel most comfortable on. But I think this list could also cover something like Shifting fairly well, or Recover the Research. So yeah, I think for now, probably take Breakthrough in that one. I'll have the screenshot of my battle deck here as well. And then in terms of the secondaries, I would realistically probably be taking Destroy Enemy Base. I think that one would be super useful. I think Recon Mission could also work really well here. And then I'm a little bit nervous about Mark Target, so I might take Surface Scan instead, just because, again, I think there are 2 obvious units to put my Surface Scans on. And then in terms of my greens, always take Intel, best one in the game. All the data shows it, and it definitely plays out in game. And then it's basically picking 2 out of Cunning, Garrison, and Ordnance. I think realistically a couple of dodges would be quite nice, maybe on that Land Speeder, for instance. Although hopefully the Land Speeder is coming on super late, so maybe it doesn't need it. But maybe on an ATRT as well, checking a dodge on those could be super nice. Garrison could be really good for those fleets, getting them a bit further up the board, and hopefully setting up those standbys with Lando and things like that to give me a bit more area control. So Garrison is a pretty reasonable take here, I think. And then Ordnance is always good because I'm increasingly seeing more vehicles and more armor specifically coming onto the board. So I think for this one, I probably will take Garrison and Ordnance. But yeah, I think this is the one that in my head is most competitive of the 3 lists. I think it has a good balance. It has it has good objective play. It has good backmarker units. It kind of has a really nice blend. So I think this is the one that stands out to me as the most competitive. Moving on to the second one, this is my favourite list, as in this is the one that I think I would have most fun with. So the Ahsoka Sabine combo that I am determined to make work, even if all logic flies in my face. They small buffed Commandos recently, so their pistols now work in melee, which is pretty nice. You don't really want them in melee, but if you are in melee, it's not the worst thing in the world. So this would be Ahsoka and Sabine, 3 Rebel Troopers, 2 of them taking Astros, Mando Resistance, 2 Sleeper Cells, again with Astro and prepared supplies, and then one with prepared supplies, 1 with targeting scopes, 3 ATRTs with the cannons, and the AA5 with Shriv for the field commander, unorthodox, and the heavy laser retrofit. So this one has some great dodge synergy. There is another version of this, which is Leia and Wicket in place of the AA5 and an ATRT. Works fairly similarly, although obviously you get a bit more dodge synergy, but maybe they're a bit more fragile than the AA5 and the ATRT. But yeah, essentially in this, it's all about the objectives. It's all about getting units with really good defense, i.e. Ahsoka, Sabine, and the Mandos onto those objectives, and then trying to hold off your opponent as long as you can and trying to deal the damage you need to deal. Going into the AA5 turn 1, I don't really know. It would either be... I love the idea of Mando Resistance in the AA5, because with the transport, speed 3, and then you can either shoot or do another speed 3, you can cover essentially the entire board. Obviously, it would put them in a very vulnerable position in order to do that, but potentially a fun idea. And then essentially the way this list works is you rely heavily on the 2-pip synergy turn for Ahsoka and Sabine to just deal as much damage as you can and hope Ahsoka, pulls out a whole bunch of crits with the Pierce 2 and wipes, does a load of damage to armor or wipes out a core unit or even a special forces unit, for instance, and then kind of go from there. It has its weaknesses, and I think the real weakness with this list is you have a lot of units that are very order hungry. So Ahsoka, Sabine, Mando Resistance, the Sleeper Cells, even the AA5, because you kind of want that to go early as well, are all quite order hungry. You do obviously have, your core and your supports, which are not order hungry, so that's nice. At least those can wait in the stack. But not having any improv, for instance, is a bit crushing in this list. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this list isn't a million miles away. I just think, paying like 170 something for Ahsoka just feels a bit bad when there are, when Bad Batch exists, for instance, who I think are almost strictly better than Ahsoka right now. So we'll see. I'm talking this one down a bit, which probably isn't fair. I should probably try and emphasize some of its benefits. Like, I will say Mandos with Nimble, and also Sabine Mando with Nimble as well, they're so obnoxious to deal with. Like, I think it just does something psychological to your opponent sometimes when it's not they give up on logic, but it's when they have, even like 2 or 3 dodges, they're sat in heavy cover and you've still got those red surging saves. So like a shot of, let's say you hit them with 10, for instance, since they're heavy cover, and for instance, let's say there's a couple of crits in there, so maybe down to 8. After heavy cover, you're getting rid of 2, maybe 3. After dodges, get rid of additional 2, so already it's down to 6. Then you roll your your red surging saves, and it's not unreasonable, to make 4 or 5 saves. So that huge hit of like 10 shots is down to 1, maybe 2 wounds, and it is quite it's quite crushing sometimes for your opponent. And the red dice, they giveth and they taketh, and sometimes they really take it, and in those occasions, like, I think it can just be a bit crushing. I think it's same as shooting at Bad Batch, for instance. I think Bad Batch feels worse in some ways as well, just because they have so many wounds. Like, you're just so aware of how valuable inflicting damage on that unit is, but if you can't inflict any damage, and it feels like you've wasted it, basically. And I think that is quite a powerful thing to have. But in that same example, like, yes, 6 hits are going through, but sometimes those red surging saves will blank on 4, and you've lost 2/3 of your unit, and you're kind of done at that point because this list doesn't have any medics. So it is a tricky one. This would be a much higher variance list, I think, and while it does have a decent balance in between, like, units that do need the orders and units that don't, I think there would be times you would feel a bit sort of stuck in terms of like trying to get units out of the bag, and that could feel a bit bad. So in terms of the command cards, I would be taking I'm a Jedi, so Ahsoka's 1-pip and Sabine's 1-pip explosions. I'm not a huge fan of explosions. I find it quite tricky to use in a sort of meaningful way. But it is a potentially quite powerful effect, and if nothing else, as kind of a suppression bomb, it is fairly useful and with a little bit of damage. So Not the worst card in the world, but yeah, not something that is as strong as it used to be. What this list is built around is Family Reunion, so that's the synergy 2-pip between Ahsoka and Sabine. I think it's one of the best command cards out there. I think it's phenomenal, like the free speed 2s, all that dodge synergy, just fantastic. And here I'm running Ahsoka with offensive push as well, so you can get that aim on her, which gives that aim to Sabine, which pretty much guarantees Sabine will be doing 2 and a bit Pierce 1 with her shots, which is super nice. Generic 2-pip push, I think Ahsoka's Guardian 2-pip is rubbish. I think Sabine's 2-pip is not useless, but also not great. The recover's nice, but not enough to take a whole command card. And then a New Beginning, Ahsoka's 3-pip, I think is really nice. That free recovery is great, and again, gets you reflexes back, gets you offensive push back, which is amazing in this list. I think there was a brief period where I tried to make force push work on Ahsoka, and just not worth it. But if you are doing that, again, you can take that force push on her and get that free recover, so it's a really nice thing to have. And then Legacy of Mandalore, it's okay. You're mostly going to be ordering trooper units anyway, so it's fine. And it gives Sabine, a little bit more oomph. So yeah, but it's fine. And I wish it did a similar effect to Ahsoka's, where it spread those dodges out a bit more, but then maybe it'd be too similar. So I think this is the least competitive one, but probably the most fun. In terms of the objectives, it would probably be fairly similar to the previous one, actually. So you would probably be looking to take breakthrough, intercept, and bunker assault would be my personal takes here. I think I really like a breakthrough. It's where I feel most comfortable, as I said before, and I think it really messes with people sometimes. And those sort of short ranges between the corners can be really nice, although sometimes you can just deploy in your back corner and play it a bit safer. For my secondaries, I probably would take a Destroy Enemy Base, again, just because I've got those speedy units that can get in there and really threaten. Like, they don't necessarily have to actually do it, but the fact they can threaten to do that is kind of enough in some ways. I would take Recon Mission, again, for reasons I stated before, and then I'd probably take Surface Scan over Mark Targets, just because Mark Targets is a little bit tricky, and while you can mark targets that will be safe, it's very hard to keep. If your opponent, for instance, marked both sleeper cells, you then have to really think about how aggressive you can use sleeper cell, and not having them in the game can be really crushing. So I do tend to try and stay away from mark targets a little bit when I have sleeper cell in the list. And then my greens, this is a very straightforward intel, cunning, ordnance. There's no core unit that's worth taking garrison here, so I think those three kind of build themselves for this list. And then the final one, this is kind of a cheat because it is 2 lists, but it is 2 lists that are very, very similar, as you will see. This is basically Jyn with Mercenary, and then Rebel Troopers with Astros or nothing. Sleeper cells with either always take the Astro, and then either prepared supplies or nothing, and then 3 ATRTs and Speeder Truck and Land Speeder. So that's the Bad Batch one, and then 2 ATRTs, a Swoop, Speeder Truck, and the Land Speeder on the other one. And again, these lists, I've put them here because they are fairly similar in terms of their core units. I think they would play out a little bit differently, and that would again just kind of complement what you were planning to sort of do with the main units in this list, which would be Bad Batch and Boba Fett. So for Bad Batch, you're kind of relying on them holding a flank by themselves, and they kind of run off and do their own thing. Boba Fett, because of Rule with Respect, which I am running, you would expect him to be more around the center of the board, buffing up your units, and then maybe he goes off and does his own thing. And what I have found with Boba is his independent standby, if you just use it for a move, he's surprisingly quick. Like, he's not speed 3, but he effectively, if you can move speed 2 3 times, I think it's actually a little bit quicker than speed 3, 2 speed 3 moves, so he can be like deceptively quick. But yeah, and obviously he doesn't have the survivability of Bad Batch. He does, in my opinion, have better command cards. Like, I think his 1-pip's still great. I really like Rule with Respect. He obviously lost his Flamer, which is a bit sad. And yeah, I think he's fine. He doesn't have the sort of solidity that Bad Batch have. I think that the huge benefit of Bad Batch is just you can chuck them somewhere. As long as you play it fairly safe in the early game, they'll be absolutely fine. And then they can just lock up some objectives for you, and that feels pretty good. Yeah, to go through the Bad Batch list first, you're kind of relying on Jyn to just be annoying more than anything else, like running around with her dodges, just tagging, sort of hoping to tag flanking or weaker units that she might actually be able to, not die to in one hit. The one thing I've learned you don't want to do with Jyn is try and run towards something big and scary, because it doesn't really matter about the dodges at that point. They can just clonk you on the head and you die. So yeah, if Jin's good at removing like repeated small amounts of damage, she's not good at like lots of damage in one go. And obviously it shouldn't have taken long to learn that, but weirdly it kind of did take me a little while to learn that. But yeah, and then you're using your Rebel Troopers as back markers. Again, I just think the Astro is a great value. I think 8 points to be able to heal up a truck or a land speeder or even an ATRT is really solid, and it actually gives them a purpose, which I know isn't a necessity, but it's sometimes like just having 120 points of Rebel Troopers just aimlessly running around, because I never think it's correct to try and shoot something unless you're desperate with naked Rebel Troopers. Yeah, so just having that Astro is super nice. Then obviously, got 3 sleeper cell in both of these, which is really nice. You do get more bang for your buck on the Boba Fett side of things, because I do have more points. You obviously get the 25 extra points for taking Boba over the Bad Batch, so they are able to give them, the prepared supplies and the targeting scopes here. The targeting scopes unit would go in the bus turn 1. That's for both of them, so essentially it's just a big scary alpha strike unit, especially on like a breakthrough, for instance, or even a close the pocket. Like that can be so scary, because you use that bus move and then the transport out, and then they get that speed 2 as well, so ends up being, I think, fairly close to range 5. I think it's like range 4.5, and that's super scary because it does just give them that extra bit of reach compared to their normal scout 2 move and shoot. So yeah, definitely something to be aware of with that sleeper cell aggression early on. And then the other 2 will just sit back more defensively and just hold some objectives for me. ATRT is going to ATRT. Love the laser cannon. I've actually been using some GAR ATRTs recently, and just so good. Like, obviously the GAR ones have red saves, but it just as a package that's so efficient. It's so good at dealing with just everything, and especially because the Rebel one has surge to crit. Like, they're pretty reliably going to put 1 or 2 through cover, and they can do that at range 4, and they can do that all game. And yeah, just great. Just a really, really good unit, really reliable, and yeah, will never let you down. And you've only spent 60 points on it, so even if it does let you down, can't be that bad. And then I love an AA5. I've seen it in a previous list, unorthodox Shriv heavy laser. I think it's just a really efficient package and surprisingly difficult to deal with, especially if you've got 3 rebels with Astros running around, healing it back up again. Really difficult for your opponent to deal with. And then the land speeder, just for that early aggression, as I've talked about in previous lists. The other advantage with the Boba Fett list, beyond the equipment you can get on the different units, is obviously the command cards you have access to. So would be taking a Simple Man and Whipcord. Again, Simple Man, you wouldn't be giving the order to Boba. You'd probably be giving it to Sleeper Cell. Not taking any of either of Jin's 1-pip or 2-pip, because I really firmly believe that Jyn never wants an order. And yeah, just getting that independent with the agile, with the independent move and the disengage, it's just amazing. And giving that up to give her an order, I think, has to be a really niche situation, because her damage isn't relevant for Jyn. Like, she hits for 4 black. That's the same as a Rebel Troop Squad. Obviously, she has surge to crit, so she hits for a bit more. But if you're lucky, you put 2.5 through. Like, there's no point running Jyn for damage, so don't do it. Just rely on her being annoying, running around, keeping those dodges. And as a result, I just don't see the point in giving her orders. Again, aggression is being run in both of these lists, just because you don't have to use it to give anything orders. And if you just give an order to a different unit, which you can do because they're mercenaries, and then you can just put an aim on in either Bad Batch or Boba Fett if that's what you want to do, that feels really valuable to me. And I am taking Boba's Whirlybird 2-pip, just because there is potential for that to A, be quite funny, and B, be quite effective in the right situations. A bit like Sabine's 1-pip. Quite situational, but in that situation, you're going to be super valuable. You did have that in your locker. And then 3-pip, Rule with Respect on Boba, it's just great, like giving those extra black dice on these fairly small and efficient dice pools. So thinking about the ATRT, thinking about the AA5, the absolute dream is to get this off on the land speeder. You do the first attack, and then you Astro, and you do it again, so you get those 2 extra black dice with all those keywords. Don't know if we live in the world where that's possible, because it does require a bit of setup, but could be really fun. And yeah, Rebellions are built on hope, so that's Jyn's 3-pip, which is pretty nice. And I actually debated giving her Underworld just so she could give it, specifically in the Bad Batch list, so she could give Bad Batch the Order and give them the danger sense and the suppression, because they're obnoxious enough as it is. Add in that extra stuff and they just become such a pain to deal with. But maybe that's a bit niche, and you will notice I've taken improv over Inspiring Presence, just because running a rebel list with these kind of units, I really think you need that improv. Just because, you know, if you, for instance, if you standing orders turn 1 and you gave the order to the land speeder, which I think is what I'd be planning to do in this, and then I pulled Bad Batch early, obviously you've got those 2 operatives, but there are other times where, you know, you get both operatives early or something. Just being able to remove that unfortunate draw is super valuable when you literally only have orders on one thing. So I think I probably would take improv over Inspiring Presence, but absolutely understand why people would like Inspiring Presence on Jyn. That Courage 3 bubble is great, and I think if I did have a separate unit with improvised orders, I would 100% be taking Inspiring Presence on Jyn. But yeah, similar builds for both of these. I think both of them would be taking Breakthrough, Recover the Research, and Shifting. The reason for the slight shift compared to the previous lists in terms of the battle deck is that I don't really have 2 big objective players in these. Arguably in the Boba Fett list, I don't even really have one. I think Bad Batch can definitely do stuff in that area, but I don't think just having them is kind of enough to play an intercept or a bunker assault. So yeah, while Bad Batch are great in that regard, I don't think it's quite enough to run a whole scenario just around them. So yeah, it's more of a kind of long range engagement, and I think my list can handle that fairly well. And with that land speeder, the threat range is great, and can also close that distance if I need to. You know, with the sleeper cell and with Bad Batch in one list, for instance, and Boba Fett's a decent linebacker as well. Although I think big melee threats would be a problem for the Boba Fett list, just because don't really have that unit. I mean, with the whipcord, you always have a shot. To be fair, at slowing a unit down, so not the worst thing. But yeah, a tricky one maybe to make work if, you know, an Anakin's running around, for instance. Then both of them taking very similar greens, so I would take Intel, Cunning, and Ordnance on these. And then in terms of my yellows, I don't think I can quite justify running destroy enemy base in these, just because, again, I don't really have that backup unit. And while, you know, I do have Swoops and Jyn, for instance, who might be able to, you know, get close and provide a bit of threat, being able to secure it might be a bit of a challenge. So yeah, probably not in this one, unfortunately, but not the worst idea. But yeah, I think in these, just fairly safe bets: mark targets, surface scan, and recon. I'm a little bit nervous, as I mentioned earlier, about mark targets with my sleeper cell units running around, and there might be a case for, you know, running like a sweep and clear, for instance, might not be the worst bet actually in these, just giving you, you know, a bit of a different option, because I will have units that maybe are moving up a bit further in the board, especially if, you know, Bad Batch are running around and can offer that steady shot to be able to wipe out a unit in my opponent's deployment zone. So yeah, bit of a tricky one, this one. Not as clear like an objective deck that kind of builds itself in the way that I think the other two did. So yeah, those are the sort of 3/4 lists that I'm considering taking to the GT. I will put a poll on the channel at the same time this video goes out, so head over there and vote on that one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I am obviously receptive to comments about changes to the lists. I'm not realistically going to make any changes to the lists, but obviously if you do have any other ideas about how these lists could be played out, or if there's changes I should make to battle deck and things like that, then let me know. But yeah, I'll be very interested to see what happens in the comments below. And yeah, thank you for liking, subscribing, etc. And I will see you for the next one.